It is specifically called Pegasus CIS 5. And the reason for this distinction is that we want to convey that this is a totally new product. It's not just simply an upgrade from earlier versions with some new features added. It's a total rewrite of the product. It has a new user interface. It has new functionality, and it has new ways in which the user interacts with both the product and the data within the product itself. Yes, it has new functionality, but as you'll see from the roadmap, we'll be increasing that functionality significantly as we move forward. Okay, so here on the technical stack, you can see that there's only a SQL Server version. We're no longer going to provide an Access version of the product, and that's really important. The reasoning behind that is that Access really isn't designed to handle large data sets. However, we are conscious that we know that in the construction industry, price is one of the most important factors that a company will look at when they're selecting a solution to handle their contract costing. But what we also know is the vast majority of the Pegasus CIS users initially bought the Access version of the product, but at some point they will be forced to upgrade to the SQL version to get better speed, better resilience, scalability as the transaction levels rise. And indeed, what we do know is that 60% of the current Pegasus CIS user base are running the SQL Server variant of version 4 of CIS. So clearly most understand the need for the SQL Server as a database. So going forward, Pegasus CIS 5 will only be supported as a SQL Server variant. However, this can be the SQL Server Express version, i.e. the free of charge version from Microsoft. The usual caveats will apply there from Microsoft, so it can only address a database size of 10 gigabytes. It can only access 1 gigabyte of memory via the database engine. 1 megabyte is the maximum size for the buffer cache, and the CPU is restricted to things like lesser of 1 socket or 4 cores. So yes, it will work under SQL Express, and in fact we've tested under both variants of SQL Server. So the first item you'll see on this technical stack for Pegasus CIS 5 is that we're using Microsoft SQL Server 2019. I've also listed here some of the other key elements to the technical stack for Pegasus CIS 5, and they include things such as .NET 4.8 framework, Visual Basic .NET as the programming language. We're using Visual Studio Tools for Office, Entity Framework. We're using Microsoft Blazor as the web app development toolkit. We're using other things such as TLS 1.2 for the communication between the client and the server to provide enhanced security, and so on. But what you really should take away from this is that we are using the latest of the modern .NET technologies, and these are the tools we'll be using for future development of Pegasus CIS 5. What we're going to do now is let's have a look at the product in action. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through and I'm going to launch Pegasus CIS 5. Okay, so here's the logon screen for Pegasus CIS 5. If I had multiple companies, at this point it would display the multiple companies. So in which case I'd select the relevant company that I want to go into. In my demo system, I've only got one company, so it doesn't give that particular option. But if I log into the system, you can start to see that the user interface is totally different to its earlier counterpart. You can see that it's much easier on the eye to look at the system. And if we go through these options at the top, you can see these are each of the modules. So if I choose these sales, then I've got various sales options. If I choose purchases and labor and subcontractors, you can see that the left-hand side of the screen is changing depending on which module I go into. And what we're trying to do is reduce the number of things that people see on screen. So yeah, here's the jobs menu, but below that will be a range of sub options. So if I choose the journal and adjustments, I can see that there's a whole range of options that are there. If I go through and choose the reports, then there's a whole range of reports that are on there. So this menu is reduced, but it does allow you to expand it to go and look at various other things that are on there. If I take this menu option at the top, I can reduce that down so it only shows the icons. And the reason for doing that is that I might need more space on the desktop to put other options that are on there, and you'll see me using that later on. However, if I expand out the journal adjustments, then they're still available to me. If I expand out the reports, then they're still available to me as well. So if you want to reduce down the desktop, then it allows you to hide those icons there. What you'll also notice as well, that we have the name of the company. If you want to change companies, simply click that button and you select the other companies that you want to change into. So it does allow you to go through and flip in between the multiple companies. What you'll also notice as well is you've got this plus icon at the top, and that allows you to open up multiple tabs. So for instance, if I go into my sales customers, so here's a list of my customers, I can add them to that list at the top. If I go to my subcontractor orders, I can add that to the top. So if I want to hop between the various options that I've selected, then it's quick and simple to go through. And the user picks and chooses which of these tabs they want to have open at the top so they can hop in and out of the system itself. So again, it's just designed to make it a little bit easier for people to go in and out of the product itself. If I go through and load a form, so let's load the jobs form, for instance, it loads it as a list view as opposed to going into the first record within the system itself. So here I can see a list of all of the jobs that I've got on the system. And I have this columns option that allows me to manage what I can see in this list view. So the columns option allows me to add columns, remove columns. It allows me to change the sort sequence of those columns and what have you. And it allows me to get totals, for instance. So if I say a total on the job number, it says, yeah, you can have a total, but the total is going to be a count because the job number is a text field, so it can't add that up. However, if I choose things like total cost and revenue, those are numeric fields and it can provide those as a sum. So if I say okay to that, then I can see here, it tells me that there's 91 records in that table. But if I go across and have a look at some of these other numbers here, then I can see, well, they're numeric, so it just adds them up for me. So it's intelligent enough to know that we can go through and do that. Okay. Okay, fine. So we can change these columns. Let me get rid of that total. It's irrelevant. We can go through, and if we want to add fields to it, like I want to add the site contact and the site phone number, just double click them, drag them to wherever I want them to be. And if I go back to the main form, then of course it's now added those on to the main form itself. So it's just allowing me to go through and tailor the way that I want to look at each of these forms that are on there. I can pin things. So if I pin the job number and say OK, when I then wander across the table, the job number's fixed. Or if I go through and also fix the job name and do exactly the same thing again, then I can see that those two fields are fixed as well. So again, it's providing additional functionality into this so that we can start to pin those items together. That was good. What else can I do? What I can do is I can group things together. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to group by customer name. So in other words, I want the customer name, then I want the job number, the name and the customer and all that other stuff to come after that. So I'm going to group it by customer name. So in which case the view looks different. Here we go. Here we've got Adams and those are Adams and those are the jobs. I can't see the job numbers for Adams. So if I go back to the columns option, I've got this option here, visible when grouped. So yeah, show me the job number and job name, and I can pick out any of the other fields as well to be visible while it's grouped. And in which case, if I go back to this, then I can see Adams, but I can now see the job number, the job name, and I can see this additional information that's on there. Again, in Pegasus CIS 4, you couldn't do that. In Pegasus CIS 5, we've provided this additional functionality to allow us to go through and have this sort of view of it. So that's fine, but let me go through. Let's get rid of grouping. I'm not going to group it by customer. I'm going to drag the customer name back down to where it was, and I'm going to unfix those. And let's get rid of these two fields as well. So in other words, I've reinstated back to what it was a moment ago. Okay, so that's fine. So we can set this to look how we want it to look. And I'm going to set the profit to be, let's have it descending. So in which case I now get this view which shows me the profit on there, highest at the top, lowest at the bottom on there. Okay, that's fine. That allows me to sort it. However, what I can do is I can save that view away. So if I take this option to save, and I'm going to call this profit view. So there we go. So we've got the default view there. We've got the profit view here, and the profit view is different because I've gone through and I've sorted it by profit. I could change the view as well. If I want to go through and add some columns to my profit views, such as, I don't know, contact name and telephone number again, then there we go. My view has now changed for the profit because it's got those additional fields on there. Or if I think that's a mistake, no, I don't want those. Just reset it back to what it was before. Then it will just go through and reset it. Now that's fine. We're essentially creating views, and you could create views in Pegasus CIS version 4. If you've got a complex view that's on there and somebody else wanted that same view, you couldn't do anything about it. In CIS 5, you've got this option here to share. So if you've created these views and you want to share these views with the rest of the team, well, then you just take the share option and it will share it with everybody else. If I don't share it, then these remain mine. So all of these views I've created here will be mine unless I decide I want to share them with the team, in which case I simply take this share option, which is a neat feature that's on there. Notice as well, whenever you've got one of these forms displayed, these list forms, you've got this filters and views options. So what this allows us to do is to filter. Do you want to look at just your open jobs, all of your jobs, or your closed jobs? Do you want to look at those assigned to me, assigned to my group, or assigned to everybody? Do I want just those that are over budget? You can go through and you can pick those particular statuses that are on there. And these filters and views are on every form. So for instance, if I go to my purchase orders form, these filters and views have changed. So on the purchase orders, you might want to be looking at these and filtering them by specific things. So for instance, I might want to look at those that require authorization, require approval, those that have been authorized or approved, those that are on hold. So it allows us to go through and change the status there. Also, I might want to look at those that are being entered today, or those purchase orders yesterday, or those purchase orders that were entered last week, or that require my authorization. So these filters and views will change depending upon the form that you go to. If I go to something like the job cost transactions, then again here, it's different. Today, what type of transactions? I want subcontractor, work in progress transactions. So I simply tick those boxes and it allows me to look at those. I've also got this open and closed option as well. In CIS4, if you wanted to look at cost transactions for jobs that were closed, that was quite difficult because you had to go into MIS transactions, cost transactions, open up the job form, go down into the job status and select it from there. Now, that's too much of a faff. You're going down 3 levels. Here, you just tick the box here, open or close, because that's a logical way in which you'd want to go and look at the data. So across the system, you'll see wherever you get these list views, you'll see these filters and views, and they will vary depending upon the form that you've actually loaded up on there. Okay, so let's go back into the jobs and let's just have a look at that column that's on there. We've got the option here to filter it as well. If I want to, for instance, look at all those that are trading resources, I can just type in TRA, and there we go. There's all the jobs that begin with TRA. So trading resources, trade counter, and whatever else they happen to be. So I can go through and I can select them very quickly via that, or I can go through and I can say, yeah, it contains the word office, let's say. So here's all the jobs that contain the word office. But as you can see, it's very quick and simple to go through and select this. Or I might want to choose a specific customer. Yeah, I want Abingdons, Adams and Andersons. So I can go through and choose individual customers. And those are all the jobs that are based on those customers that I've selected there. So quick and simple ways to go through. Or just highlight TRS 001. Filter by that selection. So we're trying to make it quite a bit easier for the user to navigate through the system, to go through and to see these sort of records that are on there. So really it's more about flexibility in the way that you can go through and do this. So if I go through and select a customer name and I say begins with the letter T, let's say. So here's all my customers that begin with the letter T. Okay, that's fine. I've got a filter on here for letter T. I also have an option to save it away. So in my list, I'm going to go through and I'm going to save this away as my T customers. So now I've got the default view and I've got my T customers view that's on there. So again, you can set up views which have filters. You can set up filters themselves which have this sort of breakdown. So it allows you additional flexibility there in creating these filters, but you can also share these filters as well. Now these filters, there it was fairly simple. But if I want to go through and build more complex filters, then I have this option here to edit the filter. So here at the moment, it's very simple. It says customer name starts with a T. And I might want to add another field in there. Yeah, that's right. But what I also want to have is I want the profit to be greater than £1,000, let's say. So I've gone through there and I've set that filter to now have customers begin with T and the profit is greater than 1,000. That's fine. They can build different filters up, but I can also be more flexible than that. I don't want to use the word and, I want to use the word or, for instance. So customers with profit begin with T and profit greater than 1,000, or customers that begin with W and the profit is greater than 10,000. So I can go through and I can create complex filters by using this filter editor that's on there. And once I've created those, I can save them away. And once I've saved them away, I can share them with the team itself. So it allows me to go through and share these sort of filters out. Once you've got a filter on screen, then what we can do is, if I want to print it, okay, so that's a particular filter. So I'm going to go through and I'm going to print this to screen, let's say. So I'm going to put it on one page and I'm going to make it landscape. And there we go, we've got that. What I can do as well, like if I want to export that out to Excel, CSV and what have you, then it allows me to go through and export any of those particular items that are on there. So you can start to see here, there's a bit more flexibility that's coming on within the system itself from being able to select the data. Okay, what else have we done? You can see we've got this new screen and we've got various options on this screen, but what I can do is I can build up my own favorites. So for instance, if I want to add jobs to my favorites, I can say, yeah, I want the job to be a favorite. If I go onto the sales side, I want my customer to be added to the favorite. Purchase side, I want my suppliers to be added to the favorite, and I want my subcontractors to be added to the favorite. So I can create my own favorites bar. And of course, when I log in, it will remember that those are my favorites and it'll display those favorites bar to me. But let's say I work on the purchasing side. I want to create another bar. It's not a favorite, but it's a purchasing function that's on there. So for instance, if I go to my purchase side, what I might want to do is I might want to put purchase orders into its own bar. So what I can do is right click and add to a new group. And this group I'm going to call purchasing. So it's now added purchase orders to that group. That's good. But what I might also want to do is I want to add purchase invoices to my purchasing group. And if I go to the subcontractors, I might want to add subcontractors orders to purchasing. I might want to add subcontractor applications to purchasing. And I might even want to add subcontractor invoices to purchasing. So it's now created this new purchasing tab which has whatever I've added into it. And if I want to change these around, yeah, I want purchasing to be at the top there because that's my main function, but I've got my favorites that I might want to look at as well. So what I'm showing you here is you can personalize your screen. If you want your screen to look, I want it to look like that, well then I change it and it looks like that. And of course, when I come back in, it will remember that that's the way that I've set up my particular system. So it remembers this sort of layout and those other functions that were on the filters and what have you. So it allows us to go through and do that sort of stuff. You know, on the purchasing side, if you raise a purchase order, you can automatically email a purchase order to the supplier. We've now extended that to the sales side. And let me show you. If I go into a customer record, and let's go and have a look at Adams Light Engineering. If I look at the settings tab, this allows me to choose email template. So I might say, yeah, I want you to email a sales invoice. I want you to email a credit note, and I want you to email out a contract certificate as well. So it allows me to select those, and therefore when I create a contract certificate, it will therefore give me the option to go through and email that certificate out to those people. And those are set up under the settings, email templates. So for my sales invoice, what's the email going to look like? Well, it's going to say this wording here with these fields inserted and what have you, because I've defined that template. And of course, I could have multiple templates for different types of customers that I'm sending those sales invoices through to. So it allows you to go through and have that additional functionality of sending out additional sorts of email types. Okay, fair enough. Let's go back to the jobs form. Let's have a look at my jobs. So if I go into this Rothsay Ferry Terminal, what we've tried to do here is, because we've got more real estate on the screen, we can map it out in a better format. So if you looked at Pegasus CIS version 4, these descriptions were on a second tab. We've got space now, so let's put this stuff onto the first tab itself so that it allows us to get more onto the real estate we've got. But these tabs across here remain pretty much the same. So if you look at the site, you look at the settings, you look at the contract sales, sales summary, you'll recognize those. Those are the sorts of screens that you saw before. If you go into the cost tab, then yeah, here's the cost tab itself and it shows me the cost. But if I want to look at the cost phases, then what I can do is I can pin the cost phases to this form. So here we go, that's the cost. These are the phases for that. And if I save this away, then next time I log in, that's exactly how it will look. And in Pegasus CIS version 4, you could drill down. Well, obviously you can drill down in Pegasus CIS 5. So if I want to drill down it into phase 1, just double click it. Yeah, there's phase 1. If I want to look at the phase headings, just double click it. And here's all the phase headings. And then if I want to click down into plant hire, Then there's plan time. I could look at the transactions and all that. So that sort of functionality remains very much the same as it did in Pegasus CIS4 that's on there. It does allow us to do that sort of drill down. But you might have noticed each time we did one of those drill downs, because it was in one of those list views, it would have given me the ability to look at those filters and what have you. Okay, we're on the Rothsay ferry terminal form, and what I want to do is I want to look at cost transactions. So I can click the cost transactions and I can pin them. And there we go. Those are the cost transactions for Rothsay Ferry Terminal. However, I don't want these displayed at the bottom. I want to move these. I want them displayed over on the right hand side, let's say. Well, I can drag them around. Where do you want them? Well, I don't want them at the bottom. I want them to appear over here. So you can tailor the screen. If you want it to look like this, tailor it to look like that. And if I move between the jobs, then you can start to see that the cost transactions are reflecting the job that we've got on here. If I leave this form and then go back to this form, it remembers the positioning. So in other words, if I go through and I start to create all of these, then it's perfectly happy to remember those positions. And that's the way the form will look each time I go into that particular form. Okay, that's fine. If I take the print option, I can print out the various documents that I could. So here's a contract performance report for that particular job that's highlighted. So again, all of this sort of printing sort of stuff is all available to us. Okay, what else we got? We've changed. We're implementing a document management system that will run right across the board itself. So within the current version of Pegasus CIS, yes, it allowed you to tag documents through to jobs. And if I select this job documents, then I can see that I've got those documents attached to this job. And in fact, if I save that away, I would have cost transactions, job documents, and the main information displayed above there. So it will remember this sort of format. But the point I'm trying to make here is that if you've got job documents, they were all associated with the individual jobs. What we've done is when you do the upgrade to Pegasus CIS5, it picks up all these documents and it will put them into a document manager. And in a future release, we will release the updated document manager, which will have all of the documents across all of the jobs, but you can then cross-relate them back together again. So for this type of job, let me have a look at the types of documents that are related to it. So here we can see what document types have we got. Well, there's a whole range of documents for this customer, but if I want to look at the quotes and the purchase orders, well, then I can limit it down by using this filtering tab. Or if I come out of this form and I go into the documents, then all of the job documents will be collated into this form. And as I said a moment ago, this will then extend out into a full-blown document management system within there with all sorts of filters and what have you that apply. Okay, what else have we done? If I go to sales, here we can see we've got dashboards. So within the system itself, we will be providing in the first release a whole range of dashboards linked into the system. So in this case, let's go and have a look at the aged debtors dashboard. So here's for sales and here's the aged debtors dashboard. Okay, what have we got? Well, here's all the customers. So here I can see here's all the customers and here's the balance that's outstanding. And for all of those customers, this is how it's been aged over current up to 120 days. And there's also a visual view of that. And across all my customers, I'm owed £683,000 and they're all at 120 days overdue. Well, that's correct because it's the demo data that's on there. I can also see the transactions that build up that 683,000. From a sales ledger perspective, I can see who the contacts are on the accounts. And from a job perspective, I can see who these people are on those individual jobs. Okay, so that's a nice dashboard. Great. So what? Well, if I want to filter it, I don't want it for all customers. I just want it for Adams. Notice now that the total value outstanding is 113,000 because it's only Adams. If I look at these transactions only belong to Adams. And if I want to get a full view of the transactions, I can maximize it. There we go. There's a full view of those transactions for Adams. And if I want to export it, I can export it to Excel, PDF as an image, or I can print preview it. And if I close that down, then it takes me back to that form below. Yeah, okay, so let's get rid of these filters. So it's for everybody. It doesn't have to be. If I want it to be for Adams and Abingdon Hire, then it's now 124,000 and these transactions relate to those two people. So these sort of dashboards allow us to create these dashboards that come with the software so that your customers can look at the data in that way. If we look at the sales retention, Here's another dashboard that we've got on here, sales retention. So this is all about the sales retention that we owe to our customers. So here we go. Here's all the jobs that have retention. What's the total value of the retention? Coming up to the total that's owed. Who are the individual customers? So these are the customers and the total retention by customer. And here's the individual transactions that build up those. But again, we can filter. Yeah, don't show it for everybody, just show it for Adams. So instead of showing the universe, here for Adams, there's £9,000 worth of sales retention across those jobs. Here's the individual transactions for Adams that's on there. Or if I clear the filter, it then takes it back to everybody. So you can start to see dashboards appearing across the system itself. If I go into the subcontractors and look at the subcontractor dashboard, let's look at the retentions due. So here's all my subcontractors. And here's all the retentions that are owed to these subcontractors. So here we go, range of retentions by jobs. So here's the jobs and there's the retention owed on those jobs. Here's the individual subcontractors and the total retentions that are owed to those subcontractors. And here's the transactions and the individual value from each of those transactions. And again, you have the filter option. Just show me the transactions for Alexander Innes. Well, there's only one job for Alexander Innes. It's 2,700 quid. And there's in fact the actual application that has that transaction that's on there. So across the system, we'll be providing these dashboards from day one within the system itself. I'll explain in a moment the philosophy behind that. But that's an introduction to the new look and feel and some of the new features that are in Pegasus CIS 5. Okay, let me hop back to my PowerPoint. Okay, let's have a look at some of the other items that are written that are or will be available. Some of them won't be available in the first release, but they'll be available soon afterwards. Automatic emailing. Well, I discussed this earlier. We've added automatic emailing into the sales invoice and the contract certificates, but we've also added it into areas such as subcontract self-billed invoices. We've added into areas such as remote timesheets, and we've also added in other enhancements associated around the area. So there's new stuff that's going into the product. All of those will be available from day one. But one of the other enhancements that we've added in is for purchase order documents. So we've added in a new purchase order documents option. And this is linked into the purchase orders, and it allows you to associate multiple documents with an order. So for instance, if you've got a quote from a supplier, you've got a technical spec from a supplier, or your own technical spec and their quote, when you automatically send the email out to that supplier, you can include those documents. So you can include multiple documents within that set itself. So yeah, here's the purchase order based on your quote, which is attached based upon our specification, which we asked you to quote against. So those all of those documents can be sent to the subcontractor, and that comes all part of the document management release. As you've seen, the dashboard's available in the initial release of Pegasus CIS 5, but you won't be able to amend those dashboards. In the next release, we'll be shipping something called a dashboard designer, and the dashboard designer will allow both you and your customers to create dashboards and to edit the existing dashboards that we provided. Also, the full document management system will be released for those customers that want integrated document management across the costing jobs system itself. And as you can see, I've done a couple of screen grabs there, and those screen grabs are taken from those two modules. Those modules are actually written, but they're in the middle of the QA process. So they won't be released in the first release, but they'll be released in the second release once they've completed QA. We've added additional fields across the system. So for instance, if you go to the bill of materials, there's additional reference fields added into there. If you go into the subcontractors form, there's fields in there. If you go into the plant asset register, we've added in logical fields such as things like service due date, test due date, tax due date, calibration due date, and so on. So there's a range of fields that we've added into the system. Also, we will be adding in a document management email monitoring service. And what this will be is this will allow for automatic importing of purchase invoices and credit notes that have been emailed to a specific Office 365 mailbox. So the documents will be emailed into you from your supplier. They will live in this mailbox. If the system can automatically pick up who they are, in other words, if your supplier has put them in a predefined format that has who they are, what the purchase order number is, then it will automatically import those from that mailbox into Pegasus CIS 5 so that you can therefore match and approve that and post it into the purchase invoice register. So basically what we're talking about there is an integrated purchase invoice importer from a supplier's email invoice, and it will link it automatically into the Pegasus CIS 5 system. What else we got? We also have additional items on the roadmap. And one of those are these web apps that we're starting to introduce. And the first web app we've got is a goods received note web app. This is a remote app that allows GRNs to be entered and posted into the system from an app. And this is useful for those customers where they have direct deliveries through the site and they want to record those deliveries as they arrive at site. So in which case, the person on site can use the web app for these GRNs, can enter the GRNs. It will then send those GRNs straight through to the Pegasus CIS system via their mobile device. And we've also extending that as well into these remote timesheets. Because if you've got workers that are out of the office and what have you, and they're incurring time against a job, well, let them use their mobile device to record the hours they've spent against a job, and then those can be automatically imported into the timesheet mechanism via this particular web app. So we're looking at more and more of these remote links into the system via web app type technology. Info Q&A, so we'll commonly known as Pegasus XRL. This will be updated to link into Pegasus CIS5. The version that will link into Pegasus CIS5 will be version 1.75. There is a version 1.74 that's just about to be released, and that links into the next version of Opera 3, which is to do with import VAT export enhancements. But the version after that will be the version that will link into CIS5. And there'll be two releases of that. The first release will be a version 10 of Infor Q&A, which uses the 32-bit Excel, but the second release will be the version 11 of Infor Q&A, and that will link into the 64-bit version of Excel. So again, we're uplifting it to the later versions of Office there. Initially, Pegasus CIS5 won't link into Opera 3 SQL SE. This will be addressed in the next main release of Opera 3 SQL SE, which is currently scheduled for August, September. When that version becomes available, it will have the links into Pegasus CIS5. And we think that's actually quite important because customers might look to, if they're going to go to a SQL version, for instance, they might say, yeah, I want a SQL version of Pegasus CIS5, but I also want the SQL version of Opera 3. In other words, we're suggesting don't go to Opera 3 SQL, go to Opera 3 SQL SE. And in which case, it allow for those multiple upgrades that are on there. So that's part of the roadmap that's on there. That's quite cut down. There's an awful lot more that's in there. Okay, what have we done from a marketing perspective? So let's have a chat about the collateral we've put in place to support this release. The first thing we've done is we've created a new brochure that displays and describes the new features and functions of Pegasus CIS5, but also it comes along with a standard information that describes how and what the product is designed to do. These are provided as PDF documents and they'll be available off the Media Center within the Pegasus website. We've also created a reasons to upgrade guide that describes how Pegasus CIS5 will improve the way in which customers interact with the software, details of the new functionality, and outlines of some of the neat changes that have been implemented. And again, that will be available off the Media Center on the website. And we've also created a series of teaser videos. These are short videos. Okay, and finally, I need to discuss with you where that leaves us with the current version of Pegasus CIS 4 point, whatever it happens to be. Let me just remind you of the history for the release of Pegasus CIS. The first version was released back in August of 2005. So it's been around an awful long time now. The second major release, which was the version 3, was released in October 2009, and that had a whole range of enhancements, including things like multi-currency, external plant hire, stock warehouses, site requisitions, procurement control, and so on. The next major release was the version 4, which is the current version that's out there. That was in November of 2015, and that had things like consolidated sales applications, internal plant hire, authorization and approval processes for subcontractor orders, supplier orders, internal costing, recharge, sales phases, and so on. So you can see the sort of history that we have there. Next month, we will see the release of Pegasus CIS5. As I said before, you've seen it's a complete rewrite of the product, working in the latest technologies, a new interface and what have you, 100+ enhancements that have gone into it, and a roadmap for a whole host of new functionality that's coming down the line. So what does this mean for Pegasus CIS4? What it basically means is Pegasus CIS v4 is moving into maintenance mode. This means there will be no more development within the product. We will apply legislative changes so the existing customers continue to use the product, assuming of course that they've got a current ANC, but nothing new will be added into the product. Similarly, we will no longer accept new sales orders for Pegasus CIS v4. Existing customers will still be able to add additional features, so